Katrina Jane Demaranin, and you're watching PhilippineNews.com.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Shawne Lopes, and I am living with hepatitis B. My parents migrated here from the Philippines in the 70s and 80s, and it was here that they met. And my father was unaware that he was actually also infected with hepatitis B, and so he gave it to my mother. And I was born, I guess, the year that the vaccine was implemented, but my mother wasn't screened. So she passed it on to myself and to my brother, who is 2 years younger than me. My father was diagnosed with liver cancer in 2004. We knew that he had hepatitis B because my brother had an episode of jaundice when he was about 4 years old, and they did a biopsy and took some samples of his liver and tested the tissue and found that he had hepatitis B. And the whole family was tested. We were told that he had it, but that was pretty much it. We weren't really educated or told on how we were to go about living our lives or what that meant to us long term. So we just went about our ways. My father, unfortunately, had a very unhealthy lifestyle. He worked really hard. Our family loves to eat. And unfortunately, a lot of that contributed to his diagnosis, and he passed away in 2005. It wasn't until a couple of years after he was diagnosed that someone brought it to my attention how serious our disease was. And so I made it a point to go to the doctor and have myself tested, and I tried to encourage my brother to do the same. But again, we still didn't know what that meant. We lived as healthy as possible lifestyles. He ended up becoming a triathlete. He ran marathons. He was a temporary vegan. He was a 75% vegetarian, he liked to call himself. And he was also a champion for cancer himself after my father was diagnosed with liver cancer and after his 2-year-old daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. So he was very much into a healthy lifestyle. But unfortunately, he was not very proactive in checking his own health. This past November, my brother started to complain about having some really bad epigastric pains. He was having really bad pains in his stomach that felt like really, really bad heartburn. And he was just really tired. And this was a couple of months after he finished his first Ironman triathlon. And if you are unfamiliar with an Ironman, it's really, really intense. It's like a 26.2-mile run, a few miles swim, and like a 100-mile bike ride all in one day. And he finished this. He trained for this for a little less than a year. I mean, he was already trained for his smaller triathlons, but he trained for this, and he thought that, man, I must just be really tired from this really intense triathlon that I just did. So, he was tired, and he was having these really bad pains, and he went to the emergency room, and they said, you know what, it's probably just indigestion, so here's some medication, go home, you'll be okay. A week later, he was still having these pains, and they said, maybe there's like a tear somewhere in one of the valves from your heart, so let's do a scan. My brother he also works in radiology. He's a radiology technician. He works in interventional medicine, so he deals a lot with these types of imaging with patients with cancer. He's very familiar with the images. He works in the medical field, but he was still really unfamiliar with how to go about his health. So they did the scan on his heart, and in the image they saw a picture of his liver. And my brother looked over, and all radiology techs know each other. He looked over and he sees this image, and he sees a big mass in his liver. And he said, man, what is that? Later on that day, he was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. And unfortunately, the size of the main tumor was way beyond where he needed to be for him to qualify for a liver transplant. So our goal was to shrink the tumor and get him on that list. And the doctors were very encouraging and said, you know, you're a healthy guy, you're 30 years old, you know, your heart's in great shape, you should be okay. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And you know, he had 1 round of direct chemo into his liver, but unfortunately, he couldn't go any further because of other complications with tumors blocking his bile duct. And we lost my brother at 30 this past March. So I'm here today to tell his story and to honor him and to make it known that you know, hepatitis B is a big thing, and you know, it's pretty amazing to hear, you know, how many, I mean, amazing is probably not the big word, but it's crazy to hear that so many of us are infected and we don't know about it. And it's also discouraging to know that, you know, how little we know in our community on what to do to treat this. And so it's very important to get screened. It's very important to make sure that we are monitoring ourselves if we are carrying that. And I wanted to tell his story, to my father's story, and honor them today. And thank you for listening.